Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dignitaries, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you all. As we are about to commence proceedings, it's a humble request to you all to be seated and please turn your mobile phones to silent mode. Thank you. In the event of an emergency, we are required to evacuate this hall through the closest emergency exit. Security and volunteers will guide you. Thank you. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والصلاة والسلام على من أرسل رحمة للعالمين، محمد خير البرية أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Please stand for the national anthem of the Sultanate of Oman. Thank you, everyone, and please be seated. Let us begin with the recitation of the Holy Quran by student Saud bin Salim al-Salti.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان. الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان. والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان. والأرض وضعها للأنام فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام والحب ذو العصف والريحان. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ خلق الإنسان من صلصال كالفخار وخلق الجان من مارج من نار. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ رب المشرقين ورب المغربين. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ مرج البحرين يلتقيان بينهما برزخ لا يبغيان. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ يخرج منهما اللؤلؤ والمرجان. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ وله الجوار المنشآت في البحر كالأعلام. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ صدق الله العظيم.
Your Excellency, Dr. Suad bin Muhammad Ali Sulaiman Al-Lawati, Minister of Arts Affairs and Patron of the Day. Your Excellencies, distinguished guest, keynote speaker, Honorable Dr. Shashi Tharoor, Member of the Parliament, Dr. P. Muhammad Ali, Chairman, University Executive Board, Ms. Budur Muhammad Rashid Al-Aremi, the Vice Chair, Executive Board, members of the University Board of Directors and Executive Board, Professor Simon Jones, Vice-Chancellor of the National University, Deans, members of press and media, my colleagues and dear students. It is an honor and pleasure to have you all here today for the National Lecture Series and the University Day. The National University is committed to transforming people and societies through the sharing and application of knowledge. The National Lecture Series is a unique platform to realize this objective. We hope this lecture will ignite minds and expand horizons. The National Lecture Series will remain a signage for cross-border dissemination of ideas to ensure a cohesive thread with stakeholders and beyond. Let us watch this video to catch a glimpse of the National University of Science and Technology.
وها هو المعلم بين تلاميذه المجدين في طلب العلم.
Under the auspicious regime of His Majesty Sultan Qaboos bin Said, the Sultanate of Oman reaches the zenith of its glory of the Renaissance through a rapid transformation of its civic life. The growth of higher education in the country has manifested through the establishment of a number of institutions since 1980. Having realized the social responsibility in transforming the quality of human capital, three well-known industrialists and the founders of Gulfar Engineering and Contracting Company, Sheikh Salim Al-Fann Al-Aremi, Dr. P. Muhammad Ali, and the late Muhammad Rashid Al-Fann Al-Aremi, established the first private engineering college in 1996 and the first private medical college in 2001. Both institutions imparted high-quality pedagogy and training and very soon became the centers of excellence in engineering, medicine, and pharmacy. The Caledonian College of Engineering was the first private engineering college in the country to be accredited by the Oman Academic Accreditation Authority. Internationally renowned accreditation agencies like IET UK and CIOB UK have adjudged the quality of all the engineering programs in addition to the institutional compliance with Abbott USA. The graduates of these institutions are preferred by most of the employers. In 2018, the government accorded permission to these institutions to become a full-fledged university by merging of three faculties of medicine, pharmacy, and engineering. It gave birth to the National University of Science and Technology. Under the patronage of His Highness Sayyid As'ad bin Tariq Al Said, Deputy Prime Minister for International Relations and Cooperation Affairs, personal representative of His Majesty the Sultan, the university was dedicated to the nation on the 3rd of December 2018. The National University has a proactive board of directors and internationally reputable personalities on the Board of Trustees. The National University is a multi-campus university with 4 campuses across the country. The state-of-the-art facilities for laboratories, workshop, postgraduate studies, research stations, IT support, and library make the learning experience in the College of Engineering unique. The fully equipped laboratories and the state-of-the-art anatomy dissection center and the highly qualified faculty keeps the training at the College of Medicine highly professional. The School of Foundation prepares the students for higher learning in the NU colleges. The College of Pharmacy provides academic instructions and undertakes professional research in the discipline of pharmacy. Students at the NU campuses have ample opportunities to develop their latent talents. Provisions for hostels, recreation, hangout centers, off-classroom learning experience, artistic expression, and self-directed learning are common features across the campuses. The National University has a set of premier higher education institutions for academic affiliation. The Caledonian Glasgow University in the UK, the South Carolina University in the USA, and the West Virginia University in the USA have active participation in ensuring high-quality education in the NU institutions. The governance of the National University is committed to ensure uninterrupted growth for facilitating a symmetric transformation of the human capital in the country. The National University has an impressive legacy of producing more than 8,000 graduates in pharmacy, medicine, and engineering. The university deploys a strategic plan to grow bigger, bolder, and better with a pathway of innovation and creativity. Its vision and mission are built up on the dream of igniting the young mind for widening horizons. The National University, building Oman's human capital.
Dr. P. Muhammad Ali, the Chairman of Executive Board and Board of Trustees, is the Pro-Chancellor of the National University of Science and Technology. Dr. P. Muhammad Ali is a distinguished personality who doesn't need introduction. He has established footprints in several countries as a leading businessman, educationalist, and socially responsible person. He has been conferred with the Oman Civil Order Award from His Majesty Sultan Qaboos bin Said in 2002, and the Overseas Indian Award in 2004 from President of India to honor the exceptional and meritorious contribution. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the visionary entrepreneur and leader, Dr. P. Muhammad Ali, to deliver the welcome address.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Distinguished Chief Patron of the Day, Her Excellency Dr. Suad bint Muhammad Ali Al-Lawatiya as Minister of Art Affairs, our respected Chief Guest Dr. Shashi Tharoor, a world-renowned author, speaker, and a dear friend. Excellencies, distinguished members of the Board of Directors and Board of Trustees, Vice Chancellor Professor Simon Jones, the university executives, the deans, the faculty and staff, and my dear students, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum and good morning, and I wish you a great start to a great day. It is my pleasure and honor and pride to be amongst you for the national lecture to be delivered by Dr. Shashi Tharoor, one of the most brilliant orators of the English-speaking listeners across the globe. Instantly, the warmth of my friendship with him adds much to my excitement today. Dr. Tharoor is one of the most powerful voices of the century whom young people around the world look at. And it is my honor to welcome my friend to this beautiful country. At the outset, I salute His Majesty Sultan Qaboos bin Said and his government for creating a unique environment which sustains peace and welfare and particular progress in higher education. No country can progress without the development of the human resources. It is the essence of economic and social progress, and education is the critical for creating and transforming the human resources for any societies. His Majesty's call for the private initiative in higher education was a new beginning for a rapid expansion of higher educational endeavors in the country. Having realized the social responsibility in transforming the quality of human capital in Oman, we established the first private engineering college in 1996 and the first private medical college in 2001. These institutions have created a legacy for producing more than 8,000 high-quality professionals in the faculty of medicine, pharmacy, and engineering. I'm extremely happy to let you know that our graduates are preferred by most of the employers and many of them are on top positions. Similarly, they figure prominently in the premier universities for higher studies. Our impressive achievement inspired us for the formation of this university. His Highness Sayyid Asad bin Tariq Al Said, the Deputy Prime Minister for International Relations and Cooperation Affairs and personal representative of His Majesty the Sultan, dedicated the National University of Science and Technology to the nation in December 2018. In the presence of prominent dignitaries, their excellencies, ministers, undersecretaries, and ambassadors. The gracious presence of His Highness has been a great source of encouragement and support and will be a guiding beacon for the university as it sets the sail. Today, we celebrate the University Day as a tribute to the dedication ceremony. The National University is a student-centric higher education institution. We want our students to be the torchbearers of values for future of human development and welfare. We are committed to creation, sustenance, and innovation of an environment that ignites minds, widens the horizons, and transforms them into a global citizens. Our students should learn from books, they should learn from experiences, and they should learn from the community. The National University is committed to make this happen throughout their academic life and help our students contribute to the development of new ideas, new concepts, and push forward to the frontiers of knowledge. We dream to grow bigger and stronger through a pathway of innovation and change. We earnestly pray and sincerely work for its successful realization. May Allah shower His grace on all our dreams and hopes. It is our priority to go beyond the boundaries of academia and create an inclusive and interactive dialogue with the larger community. The National Lecture Series is meant to realize this objective. Now it is my great privilege to extend a warm welcome to our distinguished guests. We have Her Excellency Dr. Suad bint Muhammad bin Ali Al-Lawatia as the Minister of Arts Affairs as the Chief Patron of the function. Her Excellency is a great source of encouragement, and Her Excellency's presence honors this auspicious occasion. Your Excellency, it is our privilege to have you with us and welcome you. Dr. Shashi Tharoor is the best-selling author of 19 books, both fiction and non-fiction. He has won numerous awards like Commonwealth Writers' Prize and the Crossword Lifetime Achievement Award. He was formerly the Undersecretary General of the United Nations, where he has excelled in international diplomacy and politics. His entry to the Indian politics as a Minister of State for External Affairs in the Union Cabinet was the blanket recognition for his exemplary credentials and during his tenure at the United Nations. Later, he engaged the Ministry of State for Human Resources and became responsible for initiating new strategies for revamping the Indian higher education scenario. Now, he represents the constituency of Thiruvananthapuram of Kerala in the Parliament. Despite his very busy schedule of engagement, he agreed to accept our invitation. Dr. Shashi Tharoor, a very warm welcome to you, sir. We have a distinguished gathering amidst us. Your Excellencies, ambassadors of different countries, undersecretaries, honorable officers of various ministries, members of the Board of Directors, members of the Board of Trustees, and guests from different organizations. I welcome you all. To the faculty, staff and students who are the core strength of our university, on behalf of the National University, I once again extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you. And I wish and hope we all continue to learn and progress. Have a great day. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Dr. P. Muhammad Ali. May I have the honor to introduce our Vice-Chancellor, Professor Simon Jones, a distinguished academician and an ardent researcher. With his dynamic leadership, the National University is committed to become bigger, bolder, and better through qualitative experiments in higher education. May I now invite Professor Simon Jones, the Vice-Chancellor of the National University, to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Shashi Tharoor.
Your Excellency, Chief Guest, Dr. Suad bint Mohammed bin Ali Al Lawatya, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, our distinguished speaker, Your Excellencies, Dr. P. Muhammad Ali, Pro-Chancellor of the National University, members of the University Executive Board and Board of Trustees, distinguished guests, colleagues, friends, staff, and students of the National University, welcome. Welcome to the University Day. My name is Simon Jones, and I have the privilege of being Vice-Chancellor of the National University. University Day is when we celebrate our successes with our closest friends and supporters, where we engage in thoughtful debate and thereby reaffirm our commitment to international quality education and research for Oman. We live in a globalized world. Just take a look around you. People from many different countries are here to celebrate with us today. And we celebrate today the anniversary of the formation of the National University, a university with a global outlook created through global partnerships with the University of South Carolina, West Virginia, and Glasgow Caledonian University. We are a university committed to delivering a brighter future for young Omanis, a university committed to helping Oman meet the challenges of the coming decade. And for us, here at the National University, it has indeed been a successful first year. I can report double-digit growth in the first year of our operations, and I was pleased to see that we were one of only 4 Omani universities in the 2020 QS University Research Rankings, and it's quite rare to be admitted to those rankings after only 1 year of operation. And I was encouraged by the rapid uptake of our graduate programs, which nearly doubled this year. So you see, we really are now bigger, bolder, and better. But all successes are team successes, and ours are due to the Board of Trustees, University Executive Board, senior staff and colleagues working together, and I personally thank them for their efforts and support. We've done much, yet we recognize there is much more to do. So it is right then that on this day of celebration, that we have a leading thinker in higher education to encourage us, a man who encompasses the worlds of higher education, politics, and professional achievement. Dr. Shashi Tharoor is a man experienced in the world of higher education, having received a PhD from Tufts University in the US at the enviably young age of 22. Each and every academic in this room knows what an achievement that is. And there can be few more challenging tasks than leadership at the United Nations. Dr. Tharoor was a senior leader there. Dr. Tharoor delivered successful change. He was at the heart of the United Nations for nearly 30 years. And a political career challenges the brightest mind and the most determined individual. And Dr. Tharoor has proven to be more than bright enough and more than determined enough. He's been a successful, respected, and admired representative of the people of India. The world of higher education is one of the most difficult to reform, and a modernized higher education system is a key factor in India sustaining its growth. And in leading this, Dr. Tharoor was up to the challenges. He delivered, he succeeded, he made a difference. Like all universities, we are here to learn, not just to teach. And today, we have a chance to learn from the world's leading advocate and strategist in higher education, a statesman, an author, a thinker, and above all, an achiever, Dr. Shashi Tharoor. I invite you, sir, to take the stage and deliver your speech. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Shashi Tharoor.
Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together to welcome our honorable speaker, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, to deliver his lecture on the role of universities in building global citizens.
Thank you and good morning. Her Excellency Dr. Suad Muhammad Ali Sulaiman Al-Lawati, Minister of Arts Affairs here in the Sultanate of Oman, Dr. P. Muhammad Ali, Pro-Chancellor of the National University, Professor Simon Jones, Vice-Chancellor, who gave me that very generous introduction, the distinguished ambassadors of the UAE and Sri Lanka, and other distinguished guests, faculty, friends. I hope that covers everybody. It's a great honor to be invited to the National University of Science and Technology and join you for the University Day celebrations. I was originally supposed to address you on the 5th of December, but sadly, when subsequently the dates for the recently concluded winter session of India's Parliament were announced, there was a clash and my responsibilities as an MP meant that I had to stay behind in Delhi. But your board have been very gracious and accommodative, and so I'm really glad that we have managed to work out an alternative and arrive at today's occasion. My special thanks to Dr. P. Muhammad Ali, whom all of you know as your Pro-Chancellor, but who is also someone that I have the absolute privilege of calling a friend. Although young, the National University has quickly established its credentials as a premier private institute, as the Vice-Chancellor just mentioned, that has already become a top destination for medical and engineering education here in Oman. I'm told that in the process of becoming the best institute for these fields in the country, the university has already trained over 8,000 graduates who have subsequently gone out into the world and carried forward the name of the university and the values that it has instilled in them. I'm also happy to note that the university has not just emphasized the primacy of empirical knowledge and technological education, but has made it a point to stress on the need to develop global citizens who are committed to the betterment of society. To my mind, that motivation on the part of the university represents exactly the kind of education the world needs in its current form. At the same time, in keeping with this global perspective, the university has also actively attracted some of the brightest minds from across the world, many of whom are in this room today. I'm told that at present, the university caters to over 4,000 students who represent some 33 countries, and that itself is a global community, a global village unto itself. And perhaps that makes it even more fitting for you to address the topic they have suggested, the role of universities in building global citizens. It must be said as a starting proposition that the future of higher education is global. This is not just based on the mere fact that universities in themselves are keen to attract foreign students and develop curricula that are in line with the best global practices, but a reflection of the changing nature of the world order itself. When I left for my own stint in graduate school at the United States as a teenager in 1975, the word globalization was not in use anywhere in the world. Crossing borders was still a big deal. Getting a US visa was no easy thing. I arrived in an America where to be an Indian still carried a whiff of the exotic and the unfamiliar to everybody else around me, conjuring up images of snake charmers, maharajas, fakirs lying on beds of nails, caparisoned elephants. That sort of cliche was still all that Americans knew about India. Then globalization became so widespread that the phenomenon was everywhere. It infected our everyday lives and our most commonplace conversations. Indeed, practically every headline in your newspapers today reek of globalization. Take, for example, the sad story, the headlines, the news around the world just a couple of years ago, the 20th anniversary of Princess Diana's tragic death. Well, you might well ask, what's that got to do with globalization? Well, think of it this way. An English princess with a Welsh title leaves a French hotel with her Egyptian companion, who has supplanted a Pakistani. She is driven in a German car with a Dutch engine by a Belgian chauffeur full of Scottish whiskey. They are chased by Italian paparazzi on Japanese motorcycles into a Swiss-built tunnel where they crash. A rescue is briefly attempted by an American doctor using Brazilian medicines, and the whole story is being told to you in Oman by a member of parliament representing Thiruvananthapuram in Kerala, who has just flown in from New Delhi. That's globalization. No, but seriously, what does it really mean to be, for example, a young student in the National University of Oman? It could mean waking up to an alarm clock made in China, downing a cup of tea from leaves first planted by the British, donning jeans designed in America, and taking an Indian motorbike or a Japanese car to get to a campus in Muscat, where your essays might be written on a Taiwanese laptop assembled in Malaysia, where your textbooks are printed with German-invented technology on paper first pulped in Sweden. You might call your friends on a South Korean mobile phone to invite them to an Italian pizza, or indeed a Lebanese falafel. Globalization has in some ways always been part of our history, even if the word has only come to be applied to it recently. But it is in many ways an inescapable part of our daily lives today. And globalization is here to stay, even if the forms it may take could change in the face of the challenges of today's world order and the backlashes against globalization that are happening, which still can't roll back these accomplishments in terms of the ways in which our daily lives have been affected. I won't develop that theme. We can come back to it during the question and answer period if you're interested. Today, the world is somewhat paradoxically both smaller and bigger than ever before. Smaller because of how open our borders have become, how connected we are in the age of the internet and the social media, how similar our cultural preferences and tastes have become, and how much time we spend interacting and indeed developing formal relationships with people who look, think, dress, and get by differently from the way we do. And yet, at the very same time, even as we have come together as a global community, it's also clear that we are living in countries where there's great suspicion of anything foreign, where societies in themselves have become increasingly fractured, where borders have been sealed, where our differences have been highlighted, and in some cases, where our own humanity has been fundamentally challenged. The 21st century has presented us in many ways with unprecedented challenges. Deep-rooted poverty, the expanding nexus of discriminatory politics, resource curses and crises, fragile treaties and deepening political gaps, and most importantly, perhaps some would say the greatest threat of our times, the rapidly deteriorating environmental situation, are the strongest reminders of why education should be and remain our first priority. Malala Yousafzai and Greta Thunberg have seized the imagination of the world even before going to college. And the world has millions of new graduates each year, capable of doing so much and so much more than ever before. It's time that your students too traverse the world with their innovations, inventions, unique skills and expertise. Excuse me for the occasional splutter, I've developed a nasty cough. Educated young people are our vital bulwarks against complete global chaos and societal breakdown. It is education that opens our eyes to the experiences and knowledge of other societies and countries and teaches us the universality of human aims and aspirations. Young people and their ideals would thus be the edifice upon which our global futures will be built. And this is the future we should be investing in. We are at a moment in time where the success of a civilization can be measured through its educational systems and institutions. Tools of knowledge acquisition and dissemination, attainments which trump all others and are increasingly becoming the prime determinants of a nation's worth. Now, we know this is not the case for the greater part of human history, where martial prowess, military strength, mercantile abilities, our shipping, our trade, our commerce, those were always accorded greater importance. But today, those are secondary. Sections in each society across time and space have emphasized the importance of education and philosophical thinking as among the supreme objects of human existence, celebrated through strong foundations of traditional and non-traditional methods. From Socrates in ancient Greece to the Guru Shishya Parampara in ancient India, Buddhist monasteries to South, East and Southeast Asia, medieval centers of education in England and Naples, to the present-day bastions of higher education such as this university, each society has emphasized the importance of education in its own way. India is trying to revive the legacy of Nalanda University in the ancient Magad kingdom. I'm talking about 1,500 years ago, where there were over 2,000 full-time teachers. Can you imagine? In about 500 AD, after Christ, 2,000 teachers, 10,000 students from countries ranging from Korea, Japan, China, Tibet, and Indonesia in the east, to Persia and Turkey in the west, in a remarkable campus that featured a 9-story tall library 1,500 years ago. This is before Oxford or Cambridge were even gleams in their founders' eyes, teaching subjects which included fine arts, Madam Minister, fine arts, medicine, mathematics, astronomy, politics, and the art of war. So when I mention such an ancient Indian example, of course, all of you are familiar with the more recent example of Mahatma Gandhi, who recognized the supreme importance of education as a tool for the liberation of society. Bringing the best of the conventional and unconventional methods together, Gandhiji found inspiration in the ways that knowledge of the Vedas and other foundational Hindu texts, like our epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, were passed orally from one generation to another, and so he memorably advocated oral education in place of the prevailing emphasis on textbooks, which in any case were few in India, and India starved of education under colonial rule. And so, as he said, the true textbook of the pupil is the teacher. And so in the little ashram that he created first in South Africa, Tolstoy Farm, and later in India, he taught his students through his own voice, imparting his convictions orally, disregarding the need for formal written work. As a child at school, I remember being exhorted to impart the alphabet to our domestic helpers under the Gandhian each one teach one scheme. And these are kinds of ideas that spread the value of education in 20th century India. When the British left us in 1947, they left us with just 16% literacy in the entire country. Women had been thoroughly neglected. 8.8% of Indian women knew how to read and write. We've come a long way in the 7 decades since, but it's partly or even principally because the Indian nationalist leaders appreciated the value of spreading education. While the ethos of social contributions and betterment remains the same, the efforts have now become more global. Take the internationally applauded activism of Malala, I already mentioned, who took a bullet to fight the repressive Talibani ideology that barred girls from attending school. Or her co-Nobel Peace Laureate Kailash Satyarthi in India, whose lifelong campaign to end the exploitation, sexual abuse, slavery, forced labor, and other crimes inflicted upon children culminated in international initiatives like the Global Campaign for Education and the Global Partnership for Education. There are many other movements which aim to provide quality education to children across the globe without discrimination. Education as a bedrock of progress and development has been recognized by the United Nations itself through its Sustainable Development Goals. The fourth goal, or SDG 4, is quality education. So there is no sustainable development without education, and the world recognizes this. I'm glad to have mentioned Malala and others, because yesterday, on my arrival in Oman, I was having a very interesting conversation with an Omani woman educationist who was telling me how impressive is the enrollment of women in schools and universities here, and how there are even universities where 80% of the graduates are women. That is remarkable, and I congratulate the government and the people of Oman for having brought that about. I would go one step further. As somebody who probably addresses university convocations in India a dozen times a year and gives away prizes, I have been struck by the fact that academic excellence is becoming more and more a female pursuit. Just on this weekend, I addressed a university convocation in Jaipur in India, in a university where only 20% of the students are women, but when I gave away the prizes, 60% of the prize winners, the medal winners, were all women. That is what we're seeing in the world today, and I say to the young boys here, you better shape up, because this world is slipping away from your grasp and certainly from your dominance. From this vision emerges the concept of a global citizen, the reshaping of our identities beyond the confines of national borders, sharing the merits of transnationalism and very often its dilemmas and debacles. The creation of universal goals, multicultural identities, liberal economics and the movements they encourage, which transgress boundaries, remain our sources of hope and optimism. This spirit, which can be realized through exchanges of education, knowledge systems, expertise, and so much more, generates an awareness of our shared challenges and encourages us to translate these into collaborative solutions as global citizens of the world. We take recourse to the forces of education to challenge the hate-mongering and divisive agenda of narrow-minded and bigoted politicians everywhere who have risen to power in many countries of the world, repudiating the liberal and humane values of most civilizations, which held sway right into the beginning of the new millennium. Still, as a global society, we've come a long way. Educational systems have become the beacon of hope for students in this tumultuous world. By no measure are these systems perfect, nor are they always our greatest glory, but they can be something that millions rely upon to make their lives better. In that regard, universities in our globalized world have a genuine advantage over their previous counterparts, because in today's time, it's become relatively easier to learn from other education systems and to implement them in our own countries. India's education system, for instance, was in shambles at the time of independence, as I mentioned earlier, thanks to the crippling and debilitating colonial rule, which left us with only 16% literacy, as I mentioned already, barely 30 universities, and about 700 colleges in the entire country with an enrollment of just 400,000 students in a country already then of 300 million people. So while India struggled for the next several decades as the poorest, the most illiterate, the most malnourished, and most diseased society on earth, with over half the world's illiterate adults, 40% of the world's out-of-school children all residing in India, the trajectory of our progress to our present state is all the more remarkable. Our first Prime Minister, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, had a vision and made efforts to systematically build up a very large system of education, particularly scientific and technological education, the themes of your university, and create a large pool of men and women equipped with a scientific temper and with the educational capabilities required, as well, not just science and technology, but also sensitive humanist and philosophical thought and increasing creativity, which is what has started our educational revival in India. And this is just one country that I happen to know well, but it's true of many other countries. Oman, as we've heard from the video, has been advancing dramatically in the last 2.5 decades, the last quarter century, in the educational field, and this university exemplifies that. Governments across the world are recognizing that education is a major contributor to national wealth and economic development. These inducements are further motivation for governments to improve the quality of education in their respective countries through quality assurance standards that match international criteria for education systems. Internationalization of both teaching and research is now pretty much mandatory to retain international relevance in an increasingly competitive external environment. Vice-Chancellor Jones mentioned the QS rankings, were very prestigious. There's also the Times Higher Education rankings, which I got a briefing from in my ministerial days in education. And the Times people told me that they give, in their weighting, 25% for original research, 25% for citations of research in other peer-reviewed journals, 25% for internationalization, which includes internationalization of faculty and students. So even Indian universities that may have done well in the first two criteria would always falter on the third, because we don't internationalize very much. Whereas here in the National University here in Oman, you have an international faculty, you have a lot of international students, 33 countries, and that, to my mind, is very much the way forward. There's also a positive established relationship between a country's GDP and enrollment in higher education institutes. This relationship is particularly strong for emerging economies with GDP per capita less than $10,000, where a small increase in the GDP usually contributes to a significant rise in the enrollment rate. Now, higher education institutions are the cradle of free thinking and debate, and at a time when right-wing protectionist politics are on the rise across the world, universities remain one of the few instruments through which the world's values of inclusivity can be furthered. As such, by not giving up on principles of pushing the frontiers of knowledge and endorsing diversity, these institutions can develop a generation of global citizens with an outward-looking mindset that helps international society to grow and prosper. Indeed, an exchange of students from different countries is very valuable. This is particularly true of my own country, India, where from each year, tens of thousands of students make their way to foreign universities. We have, I think, 200,000 in the US from India. We have 100,000 in Australia. Many fewer in Britain for various reasons, but nonetheless, you have a lot of Indian students studying abroad cumulatively. I'm sorry to say, spending over $2 billion of their parents' money as well. But the result is, of course, that they help become global citizens, exposed to the rest of the world, and able to hold their own in a globalized world. In the world today, access to better education is a potent ambition for which students do want to work harder, and higher education institutions are therefore poised to herald a significant new achievements. Now, in order to do that, we have to be conscious of the need for 3 E's: expansion, equity, and excellence. The first two are extremely important to ensure expansion in the number of institutions and students, and, of course, equitable access to them by everyone, regardless of their gender, their religion, their region. Many have been marginalized in the past, and they need to be included in these expanded educational institutions. Excellence is essential, of course, for inspiration. It is a magical component that propels generations forward. It's the key constituent that determines the success of any nation and its people. It is what allows a country like India, with a once ramshackle and underfinanced system, to now catapult from being a backward developing country to a sophisticated land that produces engineers and computer experts. In fact, there's a widespread stereotype now in the West that every Indian must be one of those, an engineer or a computer expert. I recently met an Indian, a history student like me, who told me that while transiting through Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam, he was accosted by an anxiously perspiring European saying, you're Indian, can you help me fix my laptop? You know, the old stereotype was of Indians who were snake charmers and sadhus, but now all Indians are seen as software gurus and computer geeks. But that too is a reflection of a transformation wrought by education. Now in 2019, some would add a fourth E, employability. Because the fact is that the question that comes up is our education relevant to the marketplace? Certainly universities are evolving to ensure that they are so, and many are moving away from the purely traditional subjects and what used to be called the classics into subjects that actually prepare their graduates to take up employment in today's very technologically oriented 21st century economy. When I think of my days as a young graduate, I was reminded of it by Professor Jones's introduction today, I think of how few the options available to us were in our college days in the early or mid-70s in my case, as compared to the plethora of opportunities presented to graduating youngsters nowadays. Especially in higher education, there are many more subjects available to study and courses that didn't exist in my college days. The world is fast moving towards studying artificial intelligence and machine learning, subjects that didn't exist in any campus just 2 or 3 years ago. Again, it's striking, for example, that a developing country like India, graduates from universities in a developing country, made India the first country in the world to successfully deploy an orbiter around the planet Mars on the first attempt. The Americans and the Europeans have done it, but after many, many failures. The Chinese and the Japanese have continued to try to do it, they still haven't succeeded. And India did so at its first attempt, and did so on a budget that was about less than the budget of the special effects budget of the Hollywood space movie Gravity. So that's the sort of thing that India has been able to achieve through education. There's greater research into space today, and it's evidenced by India's success at launching a purely indigenous mission to the south pole of the moon. Though the satellite did not succeed 100%, a new benchmark has been set for many others to follow. And of course, it reflects in many ways the extent to which people educated in this society have become global citizens with global aspirations. Now, in order to propel global education farther, global education systems need to address some serious structural challenges. Any successful system ought to match the skills of its students and their own demands of their future. As the baby boomers make way for the millennials and Generation Z, the world is going to witness revolutionary changes in its systems. Some of these changes have been much discussed and scoffed at recently, but these generations have to live with an uncertain tomorrow. The cognizance of the urgency to address some of tomorrow's challenges is already making each millennial a more global citizen than their parents were. Mind you, some are going the other way. I saw an amusing cartoon of an adolescent or a recent graduate coming back from a job fair to inform his father, this is an American cartoon, that he had decided to take up a career in snow plowing. The father said, snow plowing, why? And he said, because that job can't be outsourced to Shanghai. So there is that also, and we can't completely escape from it. Our vision for the 21st century must be to make the countries of our world all knowledge societies. What do I mean by that phrase? To me, a knowledge society is one that's capable of both creating theoretical knowledge of global significance and materially benefiting from it. A society where the pursuit of learning and innovation should not be constrained by any lack of access, infrastructure, or support. Where education is relevant to society and provides the skills and competences that the society demands and that the world can use. We must understand clearly that we're talking of a knowledge society, one that's committed to excellence throughout, rather than just creating a knowledge economy. Now, it's well known that a strong culture of research and innovation is a very important driver to ensure technical and technological leadership, which ultimately translates into the growth of a strong, robust, and self-sufficient economy and society. A look around the world today very clearly proves that investments in long-term research have a very direct impact on that nation's continued future success, intellectual as well as material. Long-term economic growth depends ultimately on innovation and inventions, and there is a strong correlation between innovation and productivity. It is therefore of critical importance for academia and industry to participate and focus on research and innovation for growth with mutual collaboration. We've seen this in the US, where a company will go to a university and say, look, if you've got doctoral students that can research into such and such idea, we'll give you the seed money to do the research, and if they pull something off, we will manufacture it and we'll share the profits with you. That sort of model has been confined, for the most part, only to America. It needs to change and become much more universal. We need to create an environment where research-led innovation plays a significant role in the day-to-day life of people and helps take the global society forward. A lot can be attained by allowing students to choose their own fields of study. Many education systems run the risk of being overregulated and undergoverned. And I'm sorry to say that parents also tend to impose their wishes on their children, forcing their children to fulfill their unfulfilled dreams. And I've been urging parents wherever I go in India not to do that to their children. Everyone wants their child to be a doctor and engineer, even if the child really desperately wants to be a painter or a violin player. The fact is, yes, there may be a more secure career available in the field that you want, but after all, success and above all, happiness depends on the aptitude of the child. I often talk about a cartoon I saw many years ago of exactly this phenomenon, which is widespread in India, of a jumbo elephant talking to a baby elephant and saying, son, I want you to accomplish everything that I've failed to. For instance, I could never learn to fly. Now, can you imagine the pressure on that poor baby elephant? And can you imagine the pressure that daily parents are putting on their children in many of our societies? Free them. Don't tell them what to do. Let them follow their bliss. Let them lead the lives they're meant to lead. Many education systems, as I mentioned earlier, run the risk of being overregulated and undergoverned. That is, that governing bodies, certainly we see this in my country, really ought to spend much less time dictating how classes must be conducted and what the size of the classroom must be, how many faculty there must be, and so on, than analyzing what the changing demands of students in the classroom are, what the employers are expecting, what learning outcomes are necessary, and then meeting those demands. The fact is that a possible solution can even sometimes lie not in the higher scientific and technological realm, but in simple vocational education at the secondary level. That is, before they get to this university stage. In South Korea and Australia, for example, some 25 to 40% of the students don't actually go to university. They adopt vocational studies and are trained for a skill immediately after the 12th standard, because they have shown no aptitude for academics. Now, if that changes, some can go ahead and join university afterwards for further studies, but meanwhile they have a useful skill, they've often become financially sound, and they've discovered what their real aptitudes are in life. Another aspect of keen importance is the availability of adequate funds for students to pursue higher education in the sphere of their choice without the burden of meeting basic expenditures. Funding from philanthropic quarters has indeed increased in some places over the years, but the fact is that the vision required is much, much larger and will take time to accomplish. There's nothing that aids in bringing the citizens of the world closer than allowing people mobility, scholarships, and so on to further their advance and their understanding of the world. The essence of a close-knit international society rests in people's acceptance of different cultures of the world as asymmetrical manifestations of the same human needs that are as old as human societies themselves. The world in many ways has tremendous potential today. We are bigger and better, all of us, all of our countries and economies, than we've ever been in our history. To harness the potential of students from across the world, we do need universities like the National University of Science and Technology in Oman to identify and train young minds to be of service to the needs of the world. For millennia, in fact, universities have been at the forefront of this challenge, motivated by the philosophical urge to better understand the world. In recent times, as the use of technology and access to the internet has become democratized and widespread to the extent that it has, the role of universities has become rather substantial. At the cusp of this important juncture in human history, where everyone is faced with a largely unknown and uncertain future, we need educational institutions to make sense of the changes and to understand how best to use them, how best to place them at our disposal without harming others. Many governments today are battling this question, as can be seen in increasing challenges, new challenges that didn't exist a few years ago, cyber attacks, breaches of privacy. All of these are signs of mounting desperation as the world gets more educated, qualified, and empowered. The onus of change rests principally upon the youth, to set the pace and to be the change makers. They have the opportunity to prevent disasters that, if we don't change our habits, are almost inevitable. They have the ability to determine the future of the entire planet and the chance to inspire highly talented individuals to achieve exceptional standards in life. In order to help them achieve these targets, we need to educate them, train them, and help transform them into productive members of society. If we fail, if we allow millions of young people around the world to grow up unequipped to take advantage of the opportunities offered in the world of the 21st century, then we'll merely add to the cohorts of disenfranchised and disgruntled people with no stake in our future, for nothing is more dangerous to many societies, including societies not far from Oman's, than a legion of uneducated or undereducated, unemployable, and frustrated young men. And I think you all know what I'm talking about. The problems, I think, are evident to all of us. There is no dearth of ideas, originality, or willpower to introduce changes in global society, but ideas do sometimes require one elementary but elusive thing, a change of policy at the top. There's a crying need to sweep the cobwebs out of education policies in many countries and oblige many governments of the world to rethink those policies that are manifestly failing their people and to move towards capacity building and excellence promotion. I must congratulate Oman for having taken the lead in moving in the right direction through a university like the National University. Meanwhile, I rest my faith with all of you in your abilities not only to recognize the global order's greatest weaknesses and turn them into our strengths, but also in your capacity to uphold universal goals and values that create a stronger world for generations to come. The bright minds beaming with youthful energy and vibrancy that I see across so many countries today and many in this room deserve nothing but the best. One looks back on the young adults studying in this university who were children just yesterday. And one is reminded of the Nobel Prize-winning Chilean poet Gabriela Mistral, a school teacher herself, who so poignantly said, We are guilty of many crimes, but our worst sin is abandoning the child, neglecting the foundation of life. Many of the things we need can wait. The child cannot. We cannot answer tomorrow. Her name is today. So we need to let 1,000 educational flowers bloom today. Thank you all very much, and congratulations on University Day. So do you want me to stay at the podium for the question and answer? Yeah? Please.
Thank you, Dr. Tharoor, for the thought-provoking and informative speech. The floor is now open to the audience for the question and answer session. Hope you will make use of this opportunity for a fruitful discussion. May I request Professor Simon Jones to moderate the session.
Thank you very much.
Around the room, we have some students with, he's waving at me, the cameraman. Let's see what he wants to do. We've got a question over there, please.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, sir. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
I'm a very big fan of your work and
Thank you.
Your oratory skills. My question is on the basis of me being a teacher across the street at Modern College and a student at University of Bradford in UK pursuing my doctoral program. How much should politics be allowed to intervene within the student and teacher community?
So allowing whom to intervene between students and teachers?
Politics.
That's a tough one. I think the short answer, it depends on each society. I understand that in some countries, for example, student politics are not permitted. In some countries, it's inevitable. In fact, I can't imagine not just India, but my own state of Kerala without student politics, which is sort of bred into the bone. I still think that the principal duty of a student is to study. But I also accept the proposition that a student cannot afford at this stage of his or her growth to be indifferent to the problems faced by the society around him. After all, education is not meant to place the student in an ivory tower. Education is meant to equip that student to be able to deal better with the problems of the society that the student is going to enter after leaving the university campus. And so, rather than saying, now you forget everything else and just concentrate on your books and lectures in the library, and in 3 years or 4 years or whatever, however long you spend, then we will give you a chance to go out and see what the problems of the world are. I think that's slightly artificial. I think that there is an argument to be made for being aware of the outside world so that education is always relevant to that world. But striking the balance between a sense of social awareness and social responsibility on the one hand, and a sense of educational commitment to your studies on the other, that balance is not always easy to strike. Very often, strike is the word because students can go on strike and then screw up their exams, lose months, if not years, because of politics. And there are other occasions where they may be kept away from politics, get a degree, but be quite indifferent to the plight of those around them who are not as fortunate as they are to get that degree. I think you do need to find a balance. And my curiosity about your question was, because you said it's politics between the student and the teacher. I think it's often it's between the student and the university administration more than with the teacher, because it's the administration that wants the student not to get involved in politics. The teachers themselves sometimes instill political ideas in the heads of students or say things the students want to react to politically. So teachers are as much a part of the political learning of the student. But it's often university rules, administration, the governmental policies of the country concerned that place constraints or permit opportunities in student politics.
Next question, please. Gentleman just behind you. It's only the people in the audience that can ask questions. We are online to a much wider audience. but because you've come here today, you certainly can ask a question. Could you introduce yourself, sir, before your question?
Good morning. My name is Sajid from India. My question, globalization has brought, or it has brought with the advancements in transportation, telecommunication, all industries. Actually, the purpose, all over the world, the people coming together or close together to a global village. But what we see now, that the distance between people, between communities increase, like anything. What's the way out, sir?
Well, there has been undoubtedly a backlash to globalization. In the short term, if you were to take the heyday of globalization as being roughly 1980 to 2008, for that a little more than a quarter century, there was no doubt that everyone was getting closer. Jet travel became easier. Satellite communications meant that you could watch events halfway across the world in real time while they were happening. You found the communications revolution, the travel revolution, the creation of the internet, the ability to move billions of dollars with a click of a mouse, the dramatic expansion of global trade. All of this was happening. So I think it was true to say that people became much more conscious of each other, much more aware of each other, and therefore the world was genuinely more of a global village than ever before. But then two kinds of backlash started in the last 10, 15 years. One is what you could understand as the economic backlash, and that is the backlash particularly in the developed countries, a backlash against the fact that many of them found that the lifestyles that they had taken for granted, they could no longer take for granted because, for example, you would find industrial towns in the Midwest of the United States where 2 or 3 generations in that town would grow up, have similar lives, expect to get the same sorts of jobs as their fathers did in the same sort of factories, but always be paid more, have bigger homes and bigger cars and so on. That was the American dream, and suddenly that American dream started melting away under the pressure of globalization. Many of these factories closed as their jobs got shipped off to Shanghai or anywhere else. And you've got a situation in which a certain economic backlash occurred in many developing countries as unemployment and the diminishing of the dream affected people, particularly blue-collar and lower middle-class people. A second backlash was what one might call a cultural backlash. And that was a rejection of cosmopolitanism, a rejection of the easy liberalism and internationalism that people saw from the boardrooms of Goldman Sachs to the flow of immigrants coming into their societies. You see that, for example, with negative reactions to Muslims in France or in Northern Europe, negative reactions to East Europeans in Britain, which has now led to Brexit, and negative reactions to Latins, but also refugees from other parts of the world in the US. And all of this is what I would call the cultural backlash, which in many Western countries fused with the economic backlash so that they both became interchangeable there. That is that, let's put it very bluntly, when President Trump said, "Make America great again," it sounded like only being about the economic backlash, but the unuttered subtext was "Make America white again," which was part of the cultural backlash, and both went together in that particular context. But if you look objectively, the truth is that there are countries in which you have one but not the other. For example, Mr. Erdogan in Turkey, Mr. Modi in India. They're very much part of the cultural backlash. They are rejecting cosmopolitanism. They are saying that as far as they're concerned, they're more authentic representatives of their people than the secular elites who preceded them. They are emphasizing their roots, their religion. In the case of Mr. Erdogan, it's Islam. In the case of Mr. Modi, it's Hindu communal identity. But all of this does not mean that they participate in the economic backlash, because they are not anti-internationalist. They want to be Davos man. They don't want to reject Davos man. So you've got both these phenomena happening. And you have to, I think, look carefully in each case as to what is the animating force. But when you have both of the first two backlashes present in some societies, then hostility mounts. But even if you have only the cultural backlash, that too results in a narrowing of a vision and an emphasis on particularist identities, which definitely undermine the kind of cosmopolitanism that we all saw as a virtue up to now. So in the era of globalization, we wanted boundaries between peoples to melt away. In the backlash era, people are erecting new boundaries. Mr. Trump is building his wall. Mr. Modi is trying to disenfranchise one religious community. Others are doing similar things in their societies. Marine Le Pen in France is arguing against immigration from North Africa, and particularly some European countries have turned very Islamophobic. You're looking at all these things happening, which perhaps before globalization would not have happened because it was not necessary, since all these people were not in their midst. Today they are there, and as a result, there is this backlash. It's not an easy situation to manage. Human beings don't often have to have solutions to all the problems they diagnose. Obviously, we have our preferences. I stand with the cosmopolitans. I believe very much in diversity, in pluralism, in internationalism, in cosmopolitanism. So my biases are clear. But others don't. In fact, my friend Stephen Harper was Prime Minister of Canada, has written a book in which he quotes the British philosopher David Goodhart on a very simple proposition. He says the world consists of two kinds of people, the somewheres and the anywheres. The somewheres are the people rooted in a sense of place, culture, religion, language, ethnicity. And the anywheres are people who are comfortable anywhere in the world, often in five-star hotels and business class lounges, who don't see any difference between speaking at the University of Oman or speaking at the University of Thiruvananthapuram. And therefore, I tend to be amongst the anywheres. But the somewheres, according to Mr. Harper, who's a bit of a conservative, are the more authentic and the more rooted of people. But of course, the problem with the somewheres is they don't like the anywheres. And they don't want too many others who are not from their somewhere to come in and change the character of their somewhere. These are part of the real problems facing the world, to which there are no simple answers. If one could strike a balance, if you can be from somewhere, but at the same time accept the value of being and going anywhere, then you have the best of both worlds.
I have a question from here. 1, 2, 3. So the first one. Please, sir, if you could introduce yourself.
My name is Yashpal Mehta, and I've been in this country for the last 37 years and have had the privilege of enjoying the bounties that this nation has to offer. My question to you, sir, is that when we talk of globalization, we talk of globalization in education, science, technology, and medicines, etc. Can we have a situation, or can we have a world where we could have globalization of values? Can we have a curricula which is a worldwide ethics and value curricula?
Thank you, sir. I mean, I do admire the idealism behind your question. But I have to tell you, having worked, for example, at the UN for 29 years trying to promote such an idea, having been with Kofi Annan when he propounded the idea of the dialogue of civilizations to replace the notion of a clash of civilizations, I've seen how difficult it is, because many countries do insist that their values are unique to their own cultures and cannot be mixed with global values. Human rights is a particular case in point, where some countries, including in this part of the world and not far from here, have taken the strong position that human rights is a Western concept and that these countries' understanding of human rights is different. There are others who say that there is a more communitarian identity in their cultures and a greater emphasis on the individual in other cultures. So given all of this, it's extremely difficult to identify values that everyone can sign up to. As you know, at the United Nations, we spent a lot of time trying to develop international understanding and agreements with some common minimums. So, for example, all the international conventions on human rights, including starting with the Universal Declaration on Human Rights in 1948, are testimony to this effort. But despite this, Some countries are not totally on board, and some countries point out they were not even independent when the Universal Declaration was adopted. So what makes it universal, they say. Others will say that they have signed a certain convention, but with riders, with caveats, so that the rights of the child. The US has retained the right to put even 16-year-old children in the army. Other countries say that a child is defined up to the age of 18 or even in some cases 21. So there will never be, I'm afraid, absolute universal standards on these values. But I would say that there must be a common minimum platform for the world to get along that must include respect for and acceptance of differences. It must include a value that actually cherishes diversity, that does not require uniformity, that values pluralism, that values the freedom of people to be themselves so long as they don't harm others. You can draw up a list like this, which I think we can get most people to agree on as a minimum common code. Can we teach that in every university? It won't be an easy task, but perhaps having an ethical foundation for every educational institution to have as a template could be a useful idea, and maybe you should suggest it to an organization like UNESCO, which has as part of its charter the right. Their charter begins with a famous proposition: since war begins in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men that the defenses of peace must be constructed. And that quote, of course, it's old-fashioned, it's 1940s, so instead of men, we should say humankind. But humankind, men and women, could well benefit from what you've just suggested. So why don't you write to the Director General of UNESCO and suggest it? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We've got one here, point out this gentleman here, and then this lady, then we'll go back to this. Okay. It looks like you have the floor, then we'll come to you. Oh.
Yes. Hannah Amin, Ministry of Higher Education.
Sorry, I beg your pardon.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I think with the SDG 2030, the fourth education, there is the targets. One of the targets is a global citizenship. And now most of the country, even here in Oman, they try to use this really term, global citizenship, in the school or something like this. And the UNESCO did a study for the 70th of European country to see if this European country include this value in their curriculum. And the percentage was very low, and I am sure you are aware because you work in the United Nations. It was about 10%. And there is really now emphasis from the UNESCO to include this in the curriculum. So what do you think? Thank you.
I'm not so sure, ma'am. I'll tell you why. I mean, I certainly am quite convinced, and it's valuable, and in many ways, I could consider myself and the life I've led to epitomize that of a citizen of the world. But the backlash I was talking about earlier in response to that gentleman is very real. It's only barely 3 years ago that the then Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Theresa May, famously said, anybody who calls himself a citizen of the world hasn't understood the first thing about citizenship. I mean, for people like that, for many of the conservatives, citizenship is fundamentally linked to rights, duties, and obligations within a certain territorial, geographical, constitutional order. And that global citizenship to such people means nothing because there is no world government of which you can be a citizen. So I think that's the challenge you would have to face. I think going back to Mr. Yashpal Mehta's question there about trying to create a common platform of values, that might be an easier place to start. Identify some of these common principles, which de facto will produce more global citizens, rather than try and teach global citizenship itself, which I fear will just create a negative backlash.
As a writer, you are a writer, how the role of the literature?
Oh, literature is profoundly important. I have no doubt that it is literature that not only expands our horizons, but gives us the opportunity to experience and understand lives we have not led, have experiences we have not personally had, and thereby not only give us a broader mental horizon and a broader worldview, but also, I think, naturally breeds in us a greater respect for others. So literature, the study of literature in a university that's trying to produce more global citizens would be a very useful thing for that purpose. There are some others who would go farther and say study literature but don't study history, because history tends to divide. People get angry about history. That's a different quarrel. I'm very fond of history myself, but at least literature, I'm 100% with you.
Thank you. This gentleman has been very patient.
I am Dr. Abdurrahim from Kerala. Actually, as you were a Minister of HR in India, and also we are spending a lot of money for the budget for education system, and also we have a lot of human resource also. Then still, why even a single institute or the university is not coming? Even the globalization is this much increased, or why it is not coming in even the first 100th rank or in the topmost universities? What you feel when you become you were a HR minister?
Well, I didn't spend too long, unfortunately, in that ministry, so maybe I will need another chance to actually make a difference. But I will say that this is a genuine problem that Indians have noticed. There are 2 or 3 reasons. Historically, Indian universities have principally been teaching institutions, whereas research has been conducted in specialized research institutes that did not do much teaching. So the result was that research and teaching took place in 2 different tracks, and the universities found themselves So they know how to look at this totally unknown innovation and figure out how best they can position themselves to deal with it, what new skills they may suddenly need to acquire to cope with it, but they can only do it if they have the foundations laid in your university. That's the kind of thing. The World Bank's Human Development Report 2016 actually was even more alarming, because in the report on South Asia, they said that 69% of the jobs in India today will be eliminated by 2030. I mean, I can't believe that. I think that's an exaggeration.
Yes.
But even if they're half right, that's a colossal challenge even for us politicians and policymakers. How do we deal? Already in our present-day society, unemployment is rising dramatically. If on top of that, even people of jobs today may not have those jobs tomorrow because they're no longer needed, what happens? How do you accommodate people? And one example is, in California now, there 2 or 3 companies are competing to work on driverless cars. I have friends in Singapore who tell me that they bought their last car because they're sure that within 5 to 7 years, the next car they will buy will be a driverless car, or the next car they may not need to buy it, they may just need to get on a driverless car to go from place to place in Singapore. That was the kind of comment that a friend of mine was making. So that change is completely unwelcome in India. Why? Not just because our traffic is chaotic, but because 25 million Indians have no other profession but driving. They are cab drivers, lorry drivers, personal chauffeurs, company chauffeurs, etc. If you suddenly had driverless cars, what would you do to employ 25 million people?
All right.
So there will be a resistance from the Indian political class to even allowing driverless cars into India. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Maybe in some limited campus or something you could have driverless cars to take people from the gate to the faculty or to the administration room, something in a very controlled, small, limited, microscopic environment. But at the national level, no way, because you're not going to want to strip these people of their work opportunities. These are some of the challenges. So the main thing is try and educate people to be prepared for that for which they're unprepared. And that's the big dilemma for faculty in universities today. Did I get your
Yes,
thrust?
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm conscious of time, and Dr. Rao has been speaking for a long time. One last question. Who would like the last question? Oh, I've got 5 now. This lady here has been very patient, and she should get her chance. And we'll slip one more in. You okay to take 2 more?
Good morning. Good
Hello.
morning, Dr. Shashi Tharoor. I am Dr. Tamanna Dalwai from Muscat College, an academician. My question is, what would be your view if a university, universities are embedding and committing themselves to sustainable development growth goals? Is that helping them build the global citizens for tomorrow?
I think I missed a little bit of what you said. A university that does a
A
core
commi-
curriculum, did you
The
say?
commitment to sustainable development goals. Is that helping them build global citizens?
Well, yes and no. I mean, the development goals really are merely a listing of targets that reflect already existing human understandings of what needs to be done. So I personally would not be necessarily inclined to get a university to focus on that. It's much more something for governments. The purpose of the Sustainable Development Goals is to get governments to have measurable indicators of achievement for targeting their governmental policies. So to my mind, that's not necessarily a primary. Quality education is one of those goals. Now, how do you measure it? There are various sub-indicators, and I would see no harm in a university looking at SDG 4, quality education, and looking at the parameters that are suggested. But those are usually national parameters and not specifically for individual universities. But on the larger questions, I hope I've addressed it in my speech, that to create a global citizen, it's important for the university to achieve and aspire to achieving global standards. That's something which you can certainly do, whatever the subject may be and whatever the context may be. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi.
Yes,
Oh,
ma'am.
someone's got the
The
last
lady
one.
with the mic, sure. go ahead.
Please, you got the
Yeah.
mic, you can speak.
Hi. I'm less than Mr. Yashpal in Oman, 25 years. He's 37 years.
Can you use the microphone, please?
Yeah, hold it closer to you, that's all.
Hi.
It's working.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was just saying I'm less than Mr. Yashpal in Oman, 25 years,
Uh-huh.
working for 3 universities. For the last 7 years, I've been with National University. Caledonian Engineering College, and I deal with master's students in marketing. My question is your widespread traveling. In schools, when I studied in school in India, we had moral science, something as moral science, and we were linked to spirituality and religion. I don't see that now in India. And how do you think spirituality and religion should be at school level or college level? With technology coming in, they are completely into studies or technology. So how would we prepare them for life other than work and job, globalization? What about humanity, values?
I agree totally with the importance of values and the importance of ethics. Teaching religion becomes a sensitive issue in some societies and in some schools. Children or their parents always have the option of sending children to religious schools where they get religious instruction. But I think what every school should be obliged to offer is certain values, education, that would include, for example, respect for the opposite gender, which has been sadly lacking in many of our societies, which should include courtesy towards others, basic prohibitions that every society instills that make decent law-abiding citizens as well as good human beings out of us all, ideally distilled from many religions. Now, here I'm venturing on sensitive terrain because you could, for example, be in a society where there is a state religion and you're not supposed to teach anything that departs from that religion. You could be in a pluralist or secular country but be studying in a religious school, or in a school that is not itself religious but has been established by a religious order. I went to a series of Christian missionary schools and I'm not a Christian. So I studied moral science, which was really biblical ethics being taught without the Bible. Now, all of these are issues that have to be sorted out at the national level. Very difficult to give a complete global prescription, other than to say that there is value in a basic ethical system being imparted from the very youngest possible age. I think unless, for example, you teach boys to respect girls from the very first grade onwards, you will end up with the kind of dysfunction we're seeing in Indian society today, with mounting number of sexual assaults and rapes, because boys are being brought up in this cloistered way, away from girls, and at the same time, they're only taught to worship a goddess or worship their mothers, but they're treated as more valuable to the household than their sisters, than their peers, and they internalize some very dangerous attitudes of entitlement, which in turn can manifest themselves in some people's behavior in deeply antisocial ways. So I think creating a certain consciousness of basic, decent human values, ideally unrelated to any specific religion. And this is just what you need to be a good citizen, to be a good human being, to be a good member of society. That is certainly something I would not object to. In fact, I would agree with you, is required from the very lowest classes.
It's values and not religion and
Exactly.
spirituality. Values.
Exactly.
Thank
you.
you.
Values and ethics.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, questions and answers. So I'd like to thank you very much, sir, for your talk, which exceeded expectations, as they say. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. You've been a great audience. Thank you.
I'm a fan of your hairstyle.
Thank you. And get straight to the question, please.
Okay. Dr. Sasi, I would like to ask one question. If an university teacher wanted to become wanted to enter Indian politics, what is your advice and what are the qualities required to enter Indian politics?
I could give you a very cynical answer and say the simple advice is don't. Only because, as I've discovered the hard way, it's a profoundly challenging profession in which very often your education, your learning, your knowledge is not particularly valued, and which in many ways can be quite cutthroat where success is often unrelated to either moral scruples, value system, principles, convictions, ideologies, and so on. And the danger that a university teacher is likely to have is that they think of the world and they think of politics as I do, very much in terms of ideas and principles and issues to fight for. And they find themselves in a real world political environment where those are the least important considerations, animating 90% of their fellow politicians. In that environment, very often you might find it a recipe for frustration and for even anger. And I'm not saying this out of complete cynicism. I'm really reflecting, though I'm not a university professor, I came into politics with a very different understanding of what the political life would mean. And I've stuck through it for 11 very hard years with my back perforated with stilettos planted there by all sorts of well-meaning and not so well-meaning people. Only because I made a few sacrifices to come there and I'm not a quitter, but also because in a democracy, politics is the only means to bring about meaningful change. And I want to go down, if necessary, in flames trying, rather than just give up and run away. Right. But it takes an enormous amount out of you, and unless you're prepared to fight daily for your principles and values, be prepared for frustration and disappointment. So it all depends on how much you want politics as opposed to your intellectual and academic pursuits.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
May I now request Dr. P. Muhammad Ali, Ms. Budur Mohammed Rashid Al-Aremi, and Professor Simon Jones to escort our chief guest and patron, Her Excellency Dr. Suad Mohammed Ali Sulaiman Al-Lawati, Minister of Arts Affairs, to the dais for felicitations. May I now request Her Excellency Dr. Suad Mohammed Ali Sulaiman Al-Lawati to present a memento to the keynote speaker, Dr. Shahji Tharoor, on behalf of the National University of Science and Technology. May I now request Dr. P. Muhammad Ali and Ms. Budur Mohammed Rashid Al-Aremi to present a memento to Her Excellency Dr. Suad bint Mohammed Ali Sulaiman Al-Lawati for gracing this occasion as the patron. Thank you all. Thank you all for attending the National Lecture Series. Please share your feedback for improvements. Our volunteers will collect the feedback form. May I now invite Professor Simon Jones, the Vice Chancellor of the National University, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Wow. Dr. Tharoor, what a great speech. Some great questions and even better answers. This truly was time well spent. We've learned much, and we have much more to reflect on and consider as we drive this university forward.
I'm sure I speak for all when I say how much we enjoyed your talk. The content, the delivery, and its importance were unmatched. And the memory of your contribution, sir, will remain long after this day has closed. So once again, thank you on behalf of the National University community, our guests, our visitors, our students. It's greatly appreciated by us all. Thank you, sir.
We conclude this ceremony of the National Lecture Series and look forward for your participation in the ensuing lecture series. Please note Dr. Shashi Tharoor is available in the Majlis boardroom for an interaction with the press and media. Thank you all.